When you look at old Blue Mountains newspapers, you'll see that people's addresses are given as house names instead of street numbers. It was quite a trend back in the day, and a lot of those names are still around. Unfortunately, most of the names are just English knockoffs without much story attached. Even something like Cellodine was just the name of an English lake and quite popular at the time. Though I'm guessing Margaret Rose was named after the princess. A lot of street names have the same problem. They're just pulled out of a hat or named after the developer's kids. Like Lindeman Road, for instance, was named after Charles Lindeman, the local bigwig I mentioned in episode 2, who built the Ritz Hotel in Leura. But some street names do mean something. Showground Lane, for instance, is near Katoomba Showground. Millyard Lane leads to what was once an old millyard. At first glance, Britain Street could be one of those boring nondescript names, though the street itself isn't boring, it has some lovely buildings on it. But then you turn a corner and suddenly you're in Victory Lane, Leura, leading to Churchill Street, Leura, and you realise there is a story here. Obviously, the street names were changed in this area for patriotic reasons during World War II. Curtin Street, for example, is named after Australia's Prime Minister during the war. And it's a nice area with lovely houses. Victory Lane is a very interesting mixture of posh and country. Not always very victorious looking. But an even more mysterious choice is in Katoomba, where there's a reserve called Bureau Park. Now, when you hear that, you might have the same reaction I did when I first heard about it. Namely, why would you call a children's playground Bureau Park? You might as well call something Filing Cabinet Fair. It sounds really odd. Which is why I looked into it and found out that the land was originally cleared by the Katoomba Agricultural Bureau, a kind of industry and social group, for its cricket club. Another naming mystery in Katoomba is Catalina Park. A Catalina is a World War II era flying boat, and when I first heard the name I thought, why call this reserve with its big pond Catalina Park? Then I found out that way back in 1946 the area was an amusement park with a Ferris wheel, a merry-go-round, tea rooms and an old Catalina flying boat stuck in the middle of the lake. But of course the area isn't really called Catalina Park anyway. All the places around the Blue Mountains were originally named by the traditional custodians, the Gundungurra and Dargan peoples. Katoomba and Katoomba, which is a Blue Mountains valley, both come from the Indigenous word for shining falling water, which was a much better option than Katoomba's original settler names, Collett Swamp and The Crushers. The Gundungurra and Dargan people call Catalina Park Garguree, which means the gully, and for thousands of years it was very important to them. Then during the late 19th century, as they were dispossessed of their traditional lands, many Aboriginal people came to settle in the Gully, where they were largely independent of the Aboriginal Protection Board. And they remained in the area until 1959, when the last of them were forcibly removed to make way for a motor racing track. But the track closed in the 1990s, and in 2002 the Gully was declared an Aboriginal place, the largest in New South Wales. And a lot of work has since been done to restore the natural swampy environment here. Educational displays have also been built exploring the history of the Gully's settlement, while while the old racetrack is slowly rotting away. It's incredibly sad to think of all the people who lost their home because a few people wanted to race cars around a track. I suppose one encouraging thing is that where once the only name commemorated at the Gully was that of Madge Walford, governor of the local quota club, there are now plenty of plaques commemorating residents of the Gully, including King Billy Lynch, who effectively founded the settlement and whose descendants still live in Lithgow and Katoomba. So what I'm saying is that names are very important. Whole books have been written about how important names are, and I'm not going to go into that myself now. But I will say that names are incredibly important to me because I have to make them up when I'm writing fiction. I have to make up names for my characters and my books, and sometimes the places that I write about that don't really exist. My most successful character name ever was Pagan. I got it from old medieval documents where a lot of men were called Paganus, which basically means countryman. I thought Pagan suited his character to a T. Another successfully named character of mine was the villain from the Genius series. His real name was Prosper, but he also had an alias, Thaddeus. Both names are erudite and authoritative and slightly sinister, all characteristics of that particular person. But thinking up good character names like that is not easy. It's really lucky if you stumble on one. You have to go looking for them. And before the internet and all these wonderful name sites that are around, I had to do all sorts of things. I had to check phone books. I sometimes looked at my History at Sydney Centenary Reflections, which has a whole lot of kind of student lists in the back, and that was always useful. And also I used to use this book, Names for Girls and Boys, which my mum bought when I was before I was born, so she could try and name me. And this is full of really good names that I've used in all kinds of books that I've written. Or I would check other lists of names that I could find, like the one on the Lura Memorial Gates commemorating soldiers of World War I. This leads to Lone Pine Avenue. Nowadays we have all these wonderful internet sites that give you Spanish names or names that were popular in the 1920s or anything like that, and that makes things a lot easier. But you still have to have a sense of sound and rhythm and history to find the right name for your character. And just one naming tip from me: if you have a lot of characters, try not to give them names that all start with the same letter, because for some reason that gets really confusing for readers. As for book names, my most successful one was probably Evil Genius, which simply sprang into my head almost before I started writing. And my most unsuccessful name is probably Little White Secrets, because everybody keeps calling it Little White Lies. Titles are really hard. In my experience, If you don't think of a good one the minute you start writing the book, you're going to kill yourself afterwards trying to think of something that works. But maybe that's just me. Some of my best titles have been from other people. Anyway, next time you're picking up a book or checking out a street name, be alert. Think about what's behind it, the meaning of it, the work that's gone into it, and happy reading.